Hello and good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to the Innovation by Design digital event hosted by the CMI Northeast Yorkshire and Humberside Regional Board. My name is Michael Bolt and I am the Events Delivery Manager at CMI, and I will shortly be handing over to Jessica Jubb to begin today's event. If you do have any questions at all during this digital event, you can ask them using the live chat box and we'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared with you later today for those of you who have registered to attend, and the event recording will also be available on the CMI website and the CMI YouTube channel. So without any delay, over to Jess to begin today's event.
Thank you. So today we're here to talk about change and innovation. They are often confused with each other. Change is about taking something from a current state to a future state, where innovation is more around creating something new, like a product or a service. You need both to be successful in business. Change enables you to become something new, stay relevant, and continue to be successful in the marketplace, but innovation disrupts the marketplace and makes you maybe one of the top people out there in the market. Today, we're going to talk to Harvey, Nicole, and Helen about user-centered design and also how you can build an innovation team. Over to Harvey. So Harvey is the Director of Digital Data and Technology, and he's going to talk about how to build an innovative team. Over to you, Harvey.
Great, thanks, Jess. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me along today. I work for the biggest care home group in the UK. We've got 270 homes, about 20,000 colleagues, HC One. And what I wanted to do really is put in context what I think is the importance of the operational, the cultural, the behavioural side of enabling design thinking and all the stuff that the guys are going to talk to you about in a bit. So I was going to give you my example of what we've been doing at HC One, how we are creating the environment to deliver kind care that we do, creating that environment for human-centered design. But I think it's applicable. I run an IT team, obviously a DDAT team, but I think the thinking and the approach is relevant to, you know, whether you're a finance team or working operations team, whatever it might be, whatever your area of operation is. I think that way of thinking and setting up the environment is really key, because by intent or otherwise, you can really stifle the way design teams need to work. I'm sure the guys will talk about that in a bit. So I was going to just cover a bit about changing expectations, the response we've had to that, and the priorities we have in HC One for that, and then we'll pick up questions on that at the end. Expectations are changing, as you know. For our service users, people are more digitally native. They're brought up with digital tools, etc. My daughter thinks it's hilarious that there were no mobile phones and computers around when I was a kid and all of that stuff. And of course, they're used to services that just work. And you know, that's a big thing now. You just expect stuff to work. It isn't just down to service users, though. Those expectations are within the workforce now more than ever. That notion of work-life balance that used to be, when I started work, you left your home, you went to work. There was a clear demarcation between the two. If home wanted to contact you at work, they often had to go through a switchboard. They'd come and find you. You had to go and use a phone and phone home and find out what was going on or whatnot. Now you have more of a life balance. You know, the mobile phones in our pockets allow us to be, for our personal responsibilities and our work responsibilities, to be much more intertwined and meshed, if you like. So it's more about life balance now. And that demands a lot more flexibility, and people are demanding a lot more flexibility. And I think what we saw during the pandemic, more people have focused on purpose and actually want us to do something that's really worthwhile and to know the value of what they do. Shorter attention spans are there. You can see that from YouTube. So if you go on TED Talks and look at TED Talks from 5 years ago and look at them now, you'll see they're about 2/3 of the length of what they were just 5 years ago. And again, the workforce expect tech just to work. So that means a business approach has to change, and that's where human-centered design comes in. I'm not going to steal the thunder of the guys that are coming on, but it is about understanding a problem. It's about understanding user needs, the journeys that those needs flow in, if you like, and you need to design or set yourselves up to be able to design solutions with users, not just for them. So the waterfall, if any of you know the Prince methodology, is very much about going out, collecting the requirements of people or what they think they are, and then going off and building something and coming back with a ta-da at the end. Human-centered design is about building with people, creating multidisciplinary teams to be able to swarm around those products and services and design things with people, creating things quickly, testing them, getting feedback, and continuing that loop iteratively to build up a product and service that really delivers against those user needs. Sometimes solving problems in a way people didn't expect, or solving problems that people weren't able to really articulate if you went and just asked for a set of requirements. Sometimes people tell you what they want, and actually it isn't really what they want when you find out at the end. Success, of course, is measured on the user experience. And as an IT team, a lot of the time our success used to be measured on whether the kit is out there, whether it's available, and whether it's working, the uptime. It was never about the benefits of that service or whatnot. What was running on that kit is how that's measured. Now, DDAT team, change you to a DDAT team, as I have done, we are equally as focused on the benefits being delivered. We're also very interested in making sure the kit's available and all that kind of stuff, but we're much more interested in sharing the goal of the user need that we're trying to meet. And that's often done via a Net Promoter Score. If you know about that stuff, you can look it up. So what does that mean for an IT team? As I said, it could be, what does that mean for a finance team or an operations team or a marketing team? Well, for an IT team, the sort of contain and constrain, computer says no strategy and that operating model really can't work to deliver against those new needs and that new way of working. So it puts a pressure on the operating model. And that's why I changed the IT team into a DDAT team, digital data and technology team. And we're a partner. An IT team is often seen as a partner in the business. You often have a business partner that works with the business that you talk about in the third party. And I've crossed out that NER bit, that partner bit, because we're part of the business. We try not to talk about the business in the third party as if there's some ethereal body that we just serve. We are the business. And DDAT people embed themselves into those products and service teams, equal skin in the game, focused on the outcome, not just the bit that they do. So our success is, as I said, focused on that benefits delivery as well. And so there's a bit about know your place. If you find yourselves just at the end of this sort of diagram here, the users, are up there, the requirements are gathered, the great and the good decide what that means, what's needed, and then they instruct all these sort of disparate teams to create something for them, usually within a project team, and then they come back and go, is this it? You're probably at the wrong end of the chain. What you'll see more nowadays, and the guys will talk about this in a minute, I'm sure, are these multidisciplinary teams, diverse teams of skills and experience that cluster around that user need and involve the users to work together in an iterative fashion. I've pulled out the agile sort of approach that government uses because that's where my experience is anchored from my sort of days working in the civil service. But the agile framework is well known. I won't go into that because the guys will cover that as well. As I said, it does start to challenge organizational setups as well, though. So, the classic sort of structure chart that you see here almost sort of goes to the back, really, and is less relevant. So what you want to know is, what are your products and service teams? What are the value chains they sit within? So we have one called the colleague journey. Used to be a very transactional thing. When you apply to join HC One, you go into a pipeline, you get processed through the application, you interview, you get onboarded, all of that stuff. You work, you do your induction, you work your first month, and you get paid. Now, if you recognize that from application through to first pay packet as a journey, a user journey, we've called that the colleague journey. There are a number of things that need to happen to flow someone through that journey. And what we do, we have a number of little products and service teams that help get someone from start to finish. And not only do we measure the various bits that need to be done during that, like doing checks, all of that stuff, visas or whatever we might have to do, but also we ask people, how ready did you feel in your first day to start work? How did this go? How did that go? So those net promoter scores kind of measures, and that turns what was a very transactional operation into a service that we deliver to our colleagues. As a result of that, we've seen our turnover go down, and we're growing in a recruitment in a market that's very short of nurses and carers and whatnot. So we're outperforming the market. There are a number of journeys that you can identify within any business. And there's a few examples here. We have the resident journey for those important people that live in our homes with us in our homes. And we have one for digital care as well. So how we bring together all the digital systems that we use to help deliver the kindest care and the medical interventions and support that some of our residents need. So again, we provide that as a service, not just those transactional sort of elements. And we build the products and services teams around that. So when you look at all these things, DDAT is greater than the sum of its parts. The digital bit is where human-centered design gets done, and we start to think about the technology that we need to use to deliver against those needs. Data is the lifeblood, if you like. We consume it, we create loads of it with digital systems, and then we need to capture, store, manage, share, and use that to become more predictive and to drive hypothesis and drive innovation and all that kind of stuff as well. The technology is the old IT bit, really. It's the technology that underpins and enables those digital systems to work and the data to flow through those value chains and for the teams to use. Service management wraps it all up, making sure system accesses their availability, and third-party suppliers are held to account for the same kind of service levels, and they're embedded into those teams as well. And we take our net promoter scoring, our feedback from within that wraparound as well. And if you look back at my old team, as it was the IT team, those elements were always there. It's just that technology dominated it, and there was a little bit of data and a little bit of digital. And DDAT really, and those modern expectations are driving a turnaround in this, so that the digital is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. Everything's becoming digital, isn't it? Because of that, data is being created at a rate of knots. And I think they say, amazing stats, in the next year, there'll be more data created than there has been in the history of the world. It's the classic stat. Understanding what you do with that and having technology base that can leverage that data and that can run all that technology is really interesting. But what we're trying to do is to lean the technology and keep it simple, platform it, and do all that kind of stuff. So technology is still really important, but digital is driving the agenda, because that's where the rubber hits the road and the user needs are met by the products and services that we create. So when you think about the alignment of the operating model and whatnot, we need to change the alignment of our team from the professional KPIs, if you like, whether it's a finance team or HR team, in my case an IT team, to anchoring us in the purpose alignment for the business. And we have two key ones. We're all about enabling our residents to lead their best lives. But my team, where they really make the difference, is enabling our colleagues to do their best work. Because when colleagues can do their best work, it frees up time for them to care. And that in turn creates an environment in which our residents can lead their best lives. And we measure those things. So again, that's the net promoter score, that purpose scoring. It challenges governance and roles and alignment. So we have new role names. We have a lot of new sort of governance frameworks and models that never used to be there in that old sort of command and control structure. They're very much about enabling and empowering those multidisciplinary teams. And that's really disruptive, both operationally and culturally, because there's a lot more trust and empowerment, that flexibility that I talked about earlier, built into that sort of way of working, because we embed our DDAT people into those products and service teams. And they're not an add-on. It's not just a meeting they go to. This is their work. So that's quite a different challenge as well. I could do a whole talk on that. For us, therefore, our priorities are really clear. We're there to enable that big digital care pathway that I talked about. We're there to enable modern collaborative working, to bring those teams to life and enable both the product service teams and our key stakeholders to collaborate and work in those flexible digital ways. and then we need to do all the heavy lift on data engineering and cloud and AI and all that stuff to enable us to become much more data-led, insight-led, rather than just doing reporting and firing off reports every week. If you went back to what it means in the old school talk, enabling digital care for us is upgrading our home infrastructure. Enabling modern collaborative working would have been rolling out modern workplace, and becoming insight-led would have been creating a data warehouse and rolling out Power BI. Now, we're doing all those things. When I talk with our stakeholders in the business, I talk about the outcomes, the digital care, modern workplace, and becoming insight-led. So, in summary, you can see on there, workforce and service user needs are changing, and that's driving a different approach to business to become more focused on the human-centered design. It starts to challenge how teams are constructed and how they see themselves and how they work, beginning to work in those multidisciplinary teams, much more collaborative, much more flexible, and much more aligned in what they do and how they talk and how they measure, how they allocate resources, how they prioritize resources against the key priorities that align to the overall business strategy and those purpose statements. That is my lot. I think I'm just within time. So thank you for that. I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Harvey. So you talk about remote working and teams now, hybrid working. How does that fit with innovation? Can you be innovative if you're not all sat in the same office?
I think you can if you use the right technology. There is nothing like being together. And I have to say, when we do brainstorming sessions or whatever, thought showers, might be the word people use now, or just those workshops, if you've got the chance to bring people together, there is something you can't get virtually that you get when you get people together. And it's usually those little meetings when you go off for the loo break and grab a cup of coffee, the little meetings happen and the chats happen. It's harder to do that virtually, but some teams can't do that. And I've worked in teams where, you're around the globe or whatever, and you just can't do that. So you can still be innovative in a virtual environment, but you have to use those tools. And that's why those collaborative tools I talked about and rolling those out are a priority for us. There's also a bit of an ESG agenda here, and dragging people, train journeys and all the rest of it that goes with it it's not always the best thing to sort of do that. So there's a balance to make, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And what are the biggest challenges you've faced in trying to embed innovation into an organisation?
Cultural, it's leadership, and you absolutely have to have buy-in, behavioural buy-in, I call it, from your exec. If the exec talk a good story but don't behave like it, and they want to command and control, want to know everything that moves, it makes it much, much harder. You cannot put multidisciplinary teams in a kind of incubator really and expect them to. You can do specific bits of work in that way and then feed it back into a business, but to actually have your teams working in that way, your operating model to work in that way, it goes top to bottom. And I'm pleased to say HC One we have that buy-in. It's great, very empowered, that servant leadership approach. But it's definitely culture, and it's having the guts to go. Really, it's being okay to fail, make mistakes. It doesn't just, you don't read the book, do some training, and then it all happens. You have to pump prime it really and give it a go. And we're in the infancy of our journey at HC One, but it's good fun. When we get stuff wrong, we share that and we learn, and we just try and do it better next time. And ultimately, it's all about the users. So if you're up front, you've got them embedded with you, you're all in the same game, and it isn't about the blame game. It's about how do we get it better, and that iterative approach gives you the time and the momentum to keep that going.
Okay. And do you think people are born innovators, or do you think it's a skill that can be learned? And if it can be learned, what do you think are the key skills to be innovative?
I think different people bring different things. So if anyone's done the colours course and that kind of stuff, all the Myers-Briggs stuff, people will bring different strengths and otherwise and experience into teams. That's why multidisciplinary teams are really important. So some people are more creative than others. Some people have an experience base that enables them to think about things differently. It's not all about age and experience. There's reverse mentoring and shadow boards with the millennials or whatever Gen Z are really key. To me, it's about bringing a diverse group together, and the more diverse or representative of the audience you're trying to serve, the more diverse those people are, the more likely you are to start driving innovation and move away from unconscious bias or that's the way we've always done it kind of thinking. You can get into that blue sky thinking. Again, it's quite cultural as well.
Okay, thank you, Harvey. So we're now going to move over to Helen and Nicole and look at user-centred design. We'll come back to Harvey at the end for some questions from the audience. But thank you, Helen and Nicole. Over to you.
Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Helen Turner and I am a content designer from Fimatix, and I'm here with my colleague Nicole Lane today, who's an interaction designer. And we're from the user-centred design team from a digital consultancy called Fimatix, and today we're going to be talking you through solving problems and developing solutions with design thinking. So what is design thinking? Design thinking is a user-centred or human-centred approach to problem solving. It applies a process that considers both the needs of the users and the business in order to identify solutions that are technically possible, economically viable, and desirable to users. Incorporating user needs helps to shift the business from how to why. This approach helps to challenge assumptions and redefine problems. Design thinking also emphasises team collaboration, allowing teams to solve challenging problems together through regular cycles of testing and iteration, which results in innovative solutions. Why do we use it? So we use it because it's a great tool for change and innovation. By working iteratively, your product can adapt to changing market trends and needs. If the product is designed around the needs of the users are more likely to engage with it, as it'll be more intuitive with better usability and accessibility for all its users. All of this results in customer loyalty and repeat customers in the future. And it's important to highlight that it's not just beneficial for the design industry, it is such an effective tool that it's been successfully applied to various industries, including healthcare, finance, retail, government and the public sector. The last two examples are sectors that we regularly support with digital transformation.
So you've heard a bit about what design thinking is and why we use it. Here is a summary of the 5 steps in the design thinking process. Step 1 is to understand or empathise with the user and the organisation. Try to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. We identify key problems, user needs, and the requirements and constraints of the business. This might include constraints with technology or any internal issues that we need to take into account. Step 2 is to define. Here we define the user needs, goals, and opportunities. User in focus. So a very basic example might be something like, instead of saying we need to increase the number of 25 to 40-year-olds purchasing maybe a salad by 25%, you could say 25 to 40-year-olds need to eat this salad to help keep them healthy and fit. So that keeps the user in focus. Step 3 is to ideate. Here we come together to brainstorm and generate ideas to address the defined problem. We also challenge assumptions and look for alternative solutions. And in step 4, we take the ideas from step 3 and create prototypes to visualize and communicate our ideas so that they can be tested on users. We design user-based concepts, approaches, and solutions to the problems we identified earlier. Finally, we test our solutions in step 5 and gather feedback and iterate based upon that feedback. This is a non-linear process, and we revisit any of the steps if and when necessary. And importantly, we involve users at each stage of the process. Here is a breakdown of those steps and just some examples of some of the activities that might happen at each stage. In step 1, understand, examples include desk research, in-depth interviews from both subject matter experts and users, competitor analysis, business analysis, problems and users, and surveys. Step 2, define, examples include design workshops, personas, experience vision, as is user journeys, including pain points and problem statements, and business requirements. Are there any legal requirements or specific timings and constraints? Whether there are legacy systems or procurement or commercial rules. Under step 3, ideate, we have activities including brainstorming sessions, problem solving, storyboarding, co-design sessions, and voting. Step 4, prototype, includes draft content, wireframing, so both low and high fidelity, or basic sketch wireframes or interactive high quality designs, so they replicate the final product or service. Concept testing, 2B user journeys and user flows, which is the path or journey taken by a user to complete a task. Under step 5, test, we provide an assessment against standards, usability testing, accessibility testing, so things like, can someone who's visually impaired access the same information using a screen reader, or is the color contrast high enough? And finally, follow-up questions.
Because understanding is a key element throughout the design thinking process, we thought it'd be really useful to explain 3 simple components for you to consider that will help you gain better understanding of your users no matter what line of work you're in. These 3 components are user goals, the context for the goal, and the behaviours associated with the goal. By thinking of these 3 components, it will help you to identify more detail about the experiences, the needs, and barriers of your users. To help explain this, I'm going to use the example of a travel mug in this instance. So when thinking about a challenge or a problem, think instead about defining the detail of the user goal. So in this instance, the goal would be to take a hot drink while you're on the move, such as the commute to work, because you may not have time to sit down with a hot drink first thing in the morning. The context is the environment where the user might complete the goal. In this case, this might be walking out the house, getting in the car, or walking through a busy platform on the train station. And finally, behaviours are things that your users try to do. This might include drinking when you get a chance, holding the mug while walking, or putting it in a bag because you already have a bunch of other things to carry. By considering these 3 components, you know that a ceramic mug from home is not going to hack it. Travel mug designs address these 3 components by including solutions such as adding a lid, making it leak-proof, and even sizing it in a way that fits a car cup holder and making it thermal. By thinking in such detail, you'll be able to see things in multiple ways in order to come up with a variety of solutions.
There might be many challenges when implementing design thinking, and here are some of the few common ones. Short-term thinking. So only looking at one product or service or just one small part of the organisation, where design thinking should really look at the whole process and be built into the long-term strategy, focusing on what the user or the customer needs. Failing to listen to users. It's easy to think about what you want out of your product or your service, but it's also crucial to listen to users at every stage and gain data back from them. This will help meet their needs and create something that resonates with them. Wanting the perfect product. It is so important to be iterative and agile, to be driven by user research, data, and analytics. As I mentioned before, it should not be a linear approach. You test, learn, go back again, improve, and test again. And finally, siloed team structures. There are so many organisations where different teams or departments rarely speak to each other. So it's really important to have a multidisciplinary, diverse team from different departments that they can reflect your organisation and their users. And this next slide will give you an example as to why. So you may have seen back in 2019, a headline, which was "Racist Passport Photo System Rejects Image of a Young Black Man Despite Photo Meeting Government Standards." This was about a black man that tried to submit a passport photo, but the facial recognition system used by the government rejected it. And again in 2021, a TikTok video went viral where a black man tried to submit a photograph again, which was rejected because it got confused by his hairline, and he believed he had his mouth open, which you can clearly see by this first picture on the left with the grey background that he did not. This was not a problem with the AI, but with the data that the AI was trained on. Face detection software is normally trained on thousands of images, but bias can enter that system when the training data isn't large or diverse enough. This is exactly why you need to ensure you represent users from all backgrounds. It's not enough just to do research and testing. You need to make sure that your product and the staff represent your audience. You need to include diversity from the outset.
Okay, so I'll now talk you through some case studies. So a direct case study example was when Fimatix supported HM Courts and Tribunal Service to redesign the probate service. With the previous probate service, HMCTS identified that there was a high level of users contacting call centres, indicating that users were experiencing issues with the service. In order to fully understand the problem, home visits were completed with users. Users were observed struggling with the cognitive load of working through large files of paperwork and complex legal processes, which was impacted further by their grief after losing a loved one. After these visits, the team had greater understanding of factors impacting users' ability to engage with the service, and ideas focused on caring and supportive solutions. After testing and iterations, the final service design today is simple and less intrusive. It has transferred paper processes to a streamlined online service, which uses simple step-by-step processes and simplified legal language. Users can now also create an account so that they can deal with the probate application at their own pace. So that's another thing that they did. This approach has resulted in reduced call centre contact as users have experienced less issues and errors. Our team at Fimatix are not the only ones, though, using design thinking. It has been widely adopted by companies to drive innovation, including Apple, Google, and Airbnb. If you're not familiar with Airbnb, they are a popular hospitality platform that allows its users to rent out their properties and spare rooms. However, when Airbnb was set up in 2008, their initial challenge was trying to find a way for users to feel comfortable with the concept of staying in a stranger's home. In order to identify ideas, the founders of Airbnb interviewed guests and hosts during home stays to gain deeper insights. From this, the founders were able to identify key issues that prevented users from making bookings, which included understanding details of trust and safety concerns. Using this information, they generated various ideas, including using a user rating system and the ability to verify user identities. These ideas were tested and proved to be successful in building users' trust and confidence. By incorporating these ideas and using a design thinking approach, Airbnb has successfully made their mark on the hotel industry with millions of users and listings worldwide. So finally, I would just like to end with some simple ways that you can apply design thinking. So first of all, apply a user-centered mindset. So start small and think of simple ways you can gather insights from your users. This might be a short survey or observing someone using your product or simply asking your users, what are your main challenges? Create a culture where your team are encouraged to problem solve. So be curious. So ask them to problem solve and share new ideas. A simple and effective way to do this is running a brainstorming session where your team members can share post-it notes on your office wall, or if you're working from home, you can use online sites such as Mural for that. Encourage collaboration. So on top of your day-to-day work patterns, try to book in regular meetings, which includes wider teams of professionals that you don't regularly partner with to gain different perspectives. And finally, iterate your ideas. Don't seek perfection, just instead learn from small changes and any difficulties along the way, because as long as it's desirable to your users, technically possible and economically viable, give it a go and let us know what comes out of it. So that's everything from us. Thank you very much.
Questions for you now. There was some terminology in your slides which our audience might not be familiar with. So I wondered if you could explain what a persona or a wireframe is, just so we can give some context there.
Yeah, so a persona would be it would be an example of somebody, of a user that uses your product or service, and you would research your users, and based on who's using it, you would give them a name, a location that they're based in, the things that they do on a day-to-day basis, where they might be using your product, and any pain points they experience or any frustrations they have when they're actually using it, so that you've got a better understanding of your user when actually creating your design, so you can really think about who they are and where they're based and what they're doing. So that goes back to the context and behavior slides that Helen was sharing earlier. And wireframes, so the prototypes are wireframes. So there's different types. So you can just have like a sketch of part of the journey. So for you think the homepage would look, you might have then a sketch of how a product page would look, and then what would happen if somebody clicks on some information on that product page. It then flows on to the next sketch. So it's an example of a journey that you can see visually to give somebody a better understanding of how it's actually going to look finally. So you start off really basic concepts, and then you might have high fidelity prototypes, which looks really very similar to the actual final product, so it can be tested with.
Great, thank you. So you work with users every day in your roles. So are there any challenges with working with customers, members of the public, that perhaps people need to consider when they're engaging with these people?
Challenges. I can't think of any challenges off the top of my head with users. I think it's to be honest, one of the most enjoyable parts of the job is actually working with the users and getting their opinions. And yeah, that is definitely my favourite part of the job. So challenges wise, off the top of my head, I'm struggling to think of any. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I was just wondering from an inclusive point of view, do we need to make sure that people can attend workshops and they're set at a time where people can finish work, or that if they've got childcare commits? Do you have to think about those sort of things in your role as well, and not just what you're researching, but the people that are engaging with you? Are those the sort of things you might consider?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's maybe why I didn't think of it as a challenge, because I think with Fimatix and our team, we're always thinking of inclusivity and ways we can support users to engage in our research. So we think of the pros and cons of working online, and it's so beneficial because you can access so many more users these days by having online calls with people, but then we also it is great to meet people in person in live workshops. So but we also think of any challenges that we might have there, and supporting accessibility and things like that. So before we do any sort of user research, we think of all of those things ahead of time. So yeah. Great,
thank you. And if someone wanted to get into user-centered design, or perhaps someone that wants to learn a bit more about it, is there somewhere they can go, research, or a particular course they can do?
There's I can't necessarily specifically recommend a specific course, but there are so many courses these days online, so many online courses. So you have the overarching UX design, and there's loads of UX design courses. However, I know that there are specific courses that you can do depending on maybe if you're really interested in a certain role within UX design. So for myself, I'm a content designer, so I know that there's content design courses, and with Nicole being an interaction designer, there's definitely UI courses out there. So yeah, there's plenty to look up. And then as for just getting on board in a UX career, there's so many learning resources out there. LinkedIn is a great resource for finding lots of learning material. I think Google are doing their own courses these days. And yeah, in my career, and I'm sure it's the same for Nicole, it's just, there's so much to find and learn and read all the time. There's so much out there. It's just a case of having a dig around books and everything.
Yeah, the Government Digital Service as well also has a really good online blog that they've done a lot of research into usability and testing. So there's quite a lot of useful information just to go over and see what they've done already.
Okay, thank you. I think we're now going to move to taking some questions from our audience. So we'll just wait for those to pop up on the screen. Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks.
Okay, so the first question is, how can AI help in modernising designs, such as with predictions on trends, tastes of consumers, etc.? I don't know if Helen and Nicole might answer that question.
Yes, so I guess with our research, we do a lot of research with users. However, I have worked in a project recently, for example, where we did use AI to support our research methods. So as part of my role as a content designer, I will often do lots of background research on user language and users' mental models, and any opinions and barriers that they have. And I'll search on the internet through social forums, Google Trends, news articles, anywhere where I can get people's real natural language and opinions. But we used, for a recent project, we used an AI tool that was able to do a much wider, cast a much wider net and gather loads of useful information around user language, what topics they were interested in relation to the research that we were doing at the time. So that gathered loads of really useful information that helped us look at things like current trends and things like that. So yeah, it definitely assisted our work, but our main work is still interpreting information from the users and taking that through the design thinking approach.
Thank you. And now next question is how do you strike a balance between corporate vision for innovation and eventual user requirements and preferences? So I don't know if Harvey, can answer anything on that. So it's corporate vision and innovation.
I'll crack at that. So we've got exactly this going on at the minute. I think having the corporate vision, if it's based around the services, benefits you're delivering out to your customers, then you're set up for success. Because what you're then trying to do is understand exactly what Nicole and Helen said, is looking at where the pain points are, and that will help direct your attention to where you may want to be innovative. So that's the proactive going in and probing for where you can deliver better services, and then getting those diverse teams that we talked about together to ideate, to really challenge assumptions, challenge biases. How many jobs was it said you can't do these jobs from home before the pandemic? And we suddenly found out actually the right technology and the right mindset, the right changes to culture, behavior and everything, actually a lot of stuff can be done from home, and some of it can be done a lot better from home. So it's setting your mindset up and how the corporate vision should be clear on the kind of outcomes you're after. What corporate visions can sometimes do is to stray into the actions and the outputs that are wanted and start to tell sort of teams what they want rather than the outcome. I'll give you a really good example of it. I was used during the war. The army said to the innovators, "Oh, can you give us some really big spotlights so we can see the planes coming earlier and shoot them down?" And then that's like the vision is still there. We want to shoot the planes down, but they're telling them the solution. The RAF said, "We need to find out when the planes are coming over nice and early so we can get to them. Can you give us something that'll do that?" And they came up with radar as a result of that, which was a complete game changer innovation. You stifle innovation if you give the solution as part of your challenge. Give the challenge the outcome and let the innovators, let those multidisciplinary teams come up with the answers.
Thank you, Harvey. Go to our next question. What is the best strategy you have observed for innovation in the workplace? So again, I don't know if Harvey, this is one you can answer.
I've probably covered a bit of that. I think the strategy is to trust your people, be clear on the outcome you want, and to set yourselves up to bring the right people together. You might have heard the phrase of hippos. If you bring the hippos in the highest paid person's opinion, if that always, they're probably in those positions because they have a certain skill set and they may be very innovative, may be very creative. But in my experience, they don't always have all the answers. So it's bringing in the right people, strategically enabling your business to bring in the right people and cluster them around problem statements to see what they come up with, and to trust in the process, the design thinking process, because it works. It works really, really well. And culturally being content to know that it might be some of your most experienced and junior people that come up with the very best ideas because they're closer to where the change is happening, maybe, and less conditioned to conform to the norm than maybe other people are.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. So how can organisations effectively balance the need for stability and structure with the need for flexibility and agility? Again, I don't know if Harvey, you can answer this.
I will feel free to chop in the other guys. Human beings like stability because it's safety, it's associated with safety. So people like regularity, routine, and that kind of stuff. But then, of course, they don't as well. And I think that expectation and that need has shifted. There's been quite a, overused phrase here, but a bit of a paradigm shift through the pandemic, especially that need from people. And that in turn puts pressure onto businesses to be much more responsive, much more proactive, anticipative. And with that is a requirement for agility. If every decision you make as a business has to come through massive sort of governance structures, you're always going to be solving yesterday's problems. So I think you've got to get lean governance in place that enables teams to work in those agile ways. But it is a cultural thing again. It's trusting and being able to fail fast is a phrase you hear a lot in this, but to get something into the hands of users quickly, learn, iterate, and keep going. And modern generations are used to this. Your iPhones and everything, they update every day with stuff. That is this process going on in the background. And sometimes you have a nightmare, don't you, where the update comes in and it's like it all goes wrong and it's all rolled back and then suddenly it's working again. That is this process happening before our eyes. And the rate of innovation that's going through, especially in digital products, is way ahead of anything that would have happened, just a few years ago. And actually, modern generations and consumers are not just used to it; they expect it, and that's why the balance needs to be shifted towards, considered risk and getting that pace, perfection, sort of balance considered and right as well. And a design thinking approach will help you do that, where you draw the line and where you go out to test.
Thank you. And I think we've still got a few minutes left if there's another question. How can we grow a grassroots pipeline to inspire local communities to innovate and commercialise social impact areas?
I could answer that. So just thinking about everything we've gone through today with the design thinking approach. So I guess it would be really understanding your users for sort of small projects, so that you can really, if you understand them, then you can really sort of communicate well with them. And so you might look at competitive analysis, where as another technique, where you look at what other similar services are doing, just to get some ideas as part of your research phase. You might, as part of your user research, you might want to do something like a focus group, just to get some ideas from your users, so you can really hone in on what's needed for your service. From a content design perspective, for myself, it's just thinking about when you are communicating with your users, just finding out little things like, what's the best way to communicate with them? Is it going to be a leaflet through their door in the local community, or is it going to be an email? Really honing in on those small details, and then thinking about the language that you're using with them, making sure and this is me from a content design perspective, just making sure you're sort of getting to the point and letting them know what you're promoting, and keeping it nice, simple and straightforward in plain English. But yeah, just using that design-centered approach to really think about your users and how you can engage them.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? How do you balance the deliberate disruption with the need to continue to meet customer needs? I'm not quite sure what they mean by deliberate disruption, but I guess the market changes every day now with technology, so disruption, comes from all angles, and I guess organisations need to keep moving and be up to speed with the latest research and technology all the time. So I guess to continue to meet customer needs is to continue to do your research. So I don't know if Helen and Nicole, you kind of do repeat research with clients. Is it a continuous circle, or is once the product's out there, is that kind of done and finished with? How do you tend to work?
Yes, it is. So it is a continuous cycle. So once you've sort of reached potentially one end product, it doesn't end there. It's continuously looking at getting further feedback, a bit like that table that Nicole was talking through earlier. You can go back and forth between the different stages just to sort of make sure that you are keeping on top of the latest needs and trends by going back through that process. So it is a constant iterative process where you can update regularly.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's something about understanding product life cycles as well. That product life cycle will come to an end and innovation will take over. That should be the next line of products. So if you look at Apple with the iPod, as music came to the iPod, it was amazing. You know, it replaced cassettes and all of that stuff, the Walkman, classically. But then music started to move on to phones. They've only actually very recently stopped making the iPod as the user need for that discrete. So those user needs for that discrete, separate, single-use item, if you like, went away. But you know, the iPhone has been going, and phones, music on phones has been going. So you don't have. There doesn't have to be this gap between deliberate disruption and then meeting consumer needs. You need to use data, all the stuff, the information that guys are talking about, to anticipate what's needed. And if that is a disruptive change to your service, you may well have to create a new product or a new service that runs in parallel for a while and in itself puts the other one into the bin, if you like. Classically, businesses are held back culturally, and they're there just being shot at by the competitors. If you looked at Netflix versus Blockbuster, for instance, you know, Blockbuster started doing stuff way before Kodak invented digital photos, you know, and they were pretty much put out of business by the move to digital, but they were the innovator. Culturally, they couldn't take that opportunity.
Okay. And I just thought, before we summarise today and finish, I just wondered, what are the sort of top takeaways we should share with our audience in terms of change and innovation from your perspective, people who work in it every day? From my point of view, I think leadership is key. I think the culture needs to enable and foster innovation. But I just wondered what your thoughts were.
Who's going to go first? I guess thinking about our presentation today, as mentioned, understanding your users, even if it's just the smallest bit of research that you can do just to get some insights, I think that's really, really useful.
Yeah, and I wondered about diversity as well. You mentioned that in your presentation. I do have a statistic here that organisations that have diverse teams are 45% more innovative than those that don't. I just wondered if that's something that rings true with you, Harvey. Is that something you see where you work?
Yeah, definitely. If you end up in an echo chamber of people that think and have the same experience as you, you know, you're not going to get innovation. And if you know, one of the most interesting conversations you had probably with people you know nothing about or completely different to you. And so yeah, I'd agree with you, Jess. Leadership culture, and that includes all that diversity. Really important for this. And actually, we're all users, aren't we? We use stuff, consume products and services every day. Think about them through that design lens and have a think about why that travel mug looks the way it looks like, because you probably never thought it just works. So you don't think about it. But when you do think about it, you'll see design thinking everywhere, and the best products and services you use, you'll see that there's very conscious design gone into them, and that's why they're so brilliant. That's why they just work.
Great, thank you. So thank you to our guest speakers today. I'm now going to hand back to Michael from the CMI team, who's just going to wrap up the session for us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jess, and thank you, Helen, Nicole, and Harvey, for the excellent discussion and presentations that you have delivered. And unfortunately, that is it for today's session. And again, thank you so much to everyone who's joined us, and of course to our speakers for your insights and expertise. And don't forget, if you are a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct using the link in the live chat. You can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources and much more. And if you are not yet a member or subscriber, you can join our community via the link that's also in the chat to gain full access to our Management Direct portal. So thank you for joining us, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.